inspiring us with your words. So I want to thank Kimberly Buhner this week, who sent me in how she has been practicing these 12 faculties. And this is what Kim had to say to me. I was at work, enjoying being there, feeling blessed and loved, peaceful and happy, when bam, I'm attacked by a coworker. And she walks away. Wait, what? I don't understand. Now I'm brooding, because there is no conversation, no way to resolve it. Another coworker witnessed the situation, and at first I thought talking to her would help. But it didn't. I felt myself becoming agitated and frustrated when I finally stood up and said, "That's enough. Just shake it off." And I shook my body. "Come on, Kim, shake it off. Wait, look at a Himalayan salt lamp. Maybe that will help me." I walked toward it, thinking of its properties to convert negative energy, when my coworker said, "Kim, stop. There's a better way. See that candle? Focus on the flame and think of a word. Then send the word to that person." I said, "Let me practice with you first." I'm looking at the flame, radiating the word peace, 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 peace. And suddenly my coworker said, "I got it. I'll buy us a bottle of wine and we'll sit and relax together." I couldn't help it. I burst into laughter. I was sending peace, and she said, "I know." And right then I shifted. I felt the harmonizing presence. I knew the oneness. Later that day, the coworker did text me. Nothing was resolved. But here's the thing. I was resolved. I was in the presence of pure being. I cannot control or convince anyone of anything. I imagine I am, and truly all is well. So thank you, Kimberly, for those words that may inspire others like you who are feeling agitated and unfocused during this time. Shake it off. Choose again. So we are at the end of our 6-week series on the 12 Freedoms, a book that was written by Phil Pearson, Reverend Phil Pearson. A whole new way of looking at our 12 powers as dyads. We began in week 1 with the unifying dyad of love and wisdom, which reminds us that we are one, and it is in oneness that we experience the divine. We moved into the 2nd week with the presence dyad of life and renunciation, choosing consciously what it is that we want to give life to, and then renunciating, releasing those ideas that we hold in mind that get in the way of what it is that we want to give life to. The next dyad that we looked at was the stabilizing dyad of strength and order, recognizing that when we place order in our lives, ordering our thoughts, ordering our words, ordering our actions, ordering our time, finding time for our prayer and meditation and all of those spiritual things that give us strength, we then can experience the power of that strength. That's the stabilizing dyad. And then we moved into the the executive dyad came next, and that is the powers of will and understanding, recognizing that we gain understanding as we move through experiences in our life, understanding of how God is at work or understanding of the world, our choice, and we do get to choose. That's the power of will. And then we moved to the manifesting dyad, the dyad of imagination and faith, recognizing that as we see in mind what we want to see, then we use the power of faith to determine what do I need to be, what do I need to see in order to allow that to become manifest in my life. And this week we are concluding our 12 Power series with the energizing dyad of zeal, enthusiasm, and power, what Phil calls dominion. So as I do each week, I'm going to start with, first of all, some words from Phil Pearson from the book. Zeal and enthusiasm incite the glorious achievement in every aim and ideal that the mind conceive. Zeal is the impulse to go forward. To turn on your energy for action, all you have to do is put yourself in God, which I have to laugh at. That's all you have to do. Put yourself in God. Not always easy to remember. Phil goes on to say, there is a great affirmation that can help put you back into God. I live and move and have my being in God. You can't say that with meaning without feeling a movement of energy. Zeal is a special expression of energy that moves us to action, sometimes extreme action. Dominion or power rules and controls. Dominion gives authority in all areas of our life. The dominion is about having an inner assurance of one's value and purpose. We must gain the energy of the dominion faculty to bring our head and heart together, knowing this is our only reality. And the faculty of dominion is closely bound by two powerful words, I am. Phil Pearson's words on our energizing dyad of zeal and power. Well, I'm thinking that this was a good week to be talking about this dyad. And I'm going to start with the power side of that dyad, which is the centering part of the dyad. Zeal must be centered in power or dominion. And as with all of our faculties, we can use each of these faculties for the good, to uplift, to inspire, to transform, or to destroy, to keep down, right? We can use it either way. So what is absolutely clear to me is when I look out into the world and I see how the world defines power, it's that keep down type of power, right? It's the power of money. It's the power of greed. It's the power of prestige. That kind of power is not so helpful in this world. I was watching a documentary this week, and that documentary was called Tell the Truth and Run. And it was a documentary about an old journalist. He passed away in the 90s. And his name was George Seldes. And George Seldes was in World War II, young soldier in World War II. And when the agreement was made that the war was ending, World War I, and that enemies would no longer cross one another's lines, George and his friends, who were reporters, decided to cross into enemy lines nonetheless, because they were interested in seeing what was happening on the other side of those lines. And George was very surprised to meet those German soldiers, those ones that he had been fighting with, because what he discovered were that those German soldiers were simply men, some of them very young men, sons, brothers, fathers, husbands, men just like him. And he and those reporters began to see that those men, that those in power had described as the other that needed to be fought against, the other that needed to be warred against, were nothing more than ordinary human beings. George and his friends were able to see what our daily word talked about today, seeing the good in all. They were able to see that good as they made friends with them in those days. And then they crossed back, and they were going to write their stories about those German soldiers, who they had met, who they had made friends with. And the powers that be, the powers in our world that support ideas of war and separation and othering, threatened them and said, you may not publish that information about those German men. They're the enemy, after all. We can't see them from the light of goodness and love. They didn't say that. That's my words. So they threatened George and his friends. They said, if you publish these articles, then we will have you court-martialed and tried for treason. And once found guilty, which you will be executed. And so George and his friends did not publish those articles until later, when they could finally tell their story. I share this because for me this week it was such an example of power in the world, the power of othering. And when we are in that place of power, we are in the place of ego. Phil Pearson talks about the powers that are in our head as being our ego faculties. Those powers include will, understanding, faith, imagination. And when we stay in our head with those powers, we are operating from the place of ego, from the place of warring, from the place of othering, from the place of fear. And so Phil says what we need to do is to unite those ego faculties with our feeling faculties, which are the faculties of our heart, love and wisdom. And that when we do so, when we take these ego faculties and combine them, join them with love and wisdom, then the result is zeal and power. Because you see, zeal and power are located here in our throat, right between our head and our heart. Zeal and power bring our ego faculties together with our feeling faculties, and when we see them from the place of goodness, from the place of rightness, we are impelled to move forward, which is what zeal is, the energy to move forward, to reveal the kingdom of heaven here on earth. But when we stay in our head with those powers, forgetting to unite them with our heart, then the zeal and the power that moves forward is worldly ego, zeal, and power. Now, I saw it this week. You saw it this week. I can't speak today without acknowledging the horrors of what we saw in the news this week. Holding George Floyd here in my heart, I watched that video. It was one of the hardest things I've watched. It made me sick to my stomach as I recognized that worldly ego power that was there in that moment. The zeal wrongly focused. Quite understandably, after that incident occurred, that zeal and enthusiasm continued to be energized. Remember that zeal is the power to move forward, the energy to move forward. So that incident continued to move forward, quite understandably, from frustration, from anger. And what we saw, not only in Minneapolis, but actually across the country, were people that moved from that place of anger and frustration to destruction. Here is zeal and power turned in ways that are not helpful, although understandable. We as a country have allowed racism to be so interwoven in our story. And that story of racism is one of power gone wrong, focused outwardly, egotistic, separating, othering. And it is time, it is beyond time for us to heal those wounds of this that is really built into the fabric of our country. And it is up to you and it is up to me to see it differently, and then to allow our love and wisdom to unite with our power of faith and imagination and will and understanding, and to move enthusiastically, claiming our divine power to be the light and to create the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And so we have another opportunity to hold one another in this place of understanding. And that can be a challenge. even as I read the daily word today, right? Here was the closing paragraph. Divine love helps me see good everywhere and in everyone. I can acknowledge in some that's easier than others. It might have been easy for you to hold George Floyd in that place of love and understanding, being willing to see his good in that moment. It may have been way more difficult for you to see that same goodness, that have that same understanding for those ones who took his life. But that's what we're called to do. We are called to rise above the situation, to move out of the ego faculties, stubbornness, that willpower, the power of that outer world. It's up to us to make a different choice. And we can't do that if we stay in our head, if we stay in the fear, if we stay in the anger, if we stay in the hurt, if we stay in the victimhood, if we stay in the blame. We have to engage our wisdom and our love in the process. And we have to be willing to see it right so that we can then set it right. I specifically chose the meditation today, that Essene Book of Peace, reminding us that God is in it all. Be still and know I am God. In the midst of a worldwide pandemic and all the uncertainty and all that is in this, be still. Know I am God. In the midst of racial tension and reconciliation, know that God is here speaking to you. I speak to you, God says. Be still. Know I am God. And doing that unites the head, the ego faculties, with the heart faculties of love and wisdom. And from there, you will own and recognize your true power, that power of God within you, that power of love within you, that power of faith within you, that power of strength and wisdom within you. You will know those powers. You will know who you are. And you will know what action to take from that understanding. And that action that you take will be that zeal impelling you forward. That is the power of zeal. Many are enthusiastic about errors, right? Othering, separating, fear. Enthusiastic about that. Let us be enthusiastic for love. Let us be enthusiastic for peace. Let us be enthusiastic for a transformed world that works for all. That's what I am inviting you and I to do and be this week as we practice these powers, the energizing powers of power, knowing who you are, and zeal, centered in that power, and then moving forward into action, living into that power. So practice is what we are going to do together. Phil mentioned a scripture. I live and move and have my being in God. And so that is the basis for our practice this week. As we take time to meditate and contemplate on this energizing dyad of zeal and power. Begin your day with the idea, in God I live and move and have my being. I am one with God. Affirm that. In God I live and move and have my being. I am one with God. Repeat it so that it's no longer just a head knowing, but a heart feeling. And then allow yourself to feel how that moves you into action this week. How would you live today? How would you be today? What words would you speak today? What thoughts would you hold today? What action would you take today? Knowing that you live and move and have your being in God. At our 10 a.m. Zoom class, we started a new booklet this week called The Heart of Healing. And this has been such a powerful group. We meet Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. And so, of course, on Thursday, our conversation that morning did include some of this that happened, right? And there was a request, well, I actually shared that one of the things that I've done is to broaden my understanding of how racism has been a part of the fabric of our country since its beginning, and how I am called to acknowledge that I am racist and I am anti-racist, and how I can be an anti-racist. And I shared with that Zoom community at that time that one of the ways that really supported me in gaining my understanding was to read 2 books. And those books were written by a gentleman whose name is Ibram X. Kendi. And one of the books that I mentioned is called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And our Zoom group really perked up around that. And from their interest, I have decided that likely come July, we're going to do a book study on how to be an anti-racist. It'll take place likely in the evening. So I'm telling you this now so that you can go look for that book if this is of interest for you. If you are ready to do something, if you are ready to be empowered to know that there is something for you to do